A Stroll with Mr. Gaudi. Text and illustrations by Pau Estrada. A Stroll with Mr. Gaudi. Text and illustrations by Pau Estrada. Mr. Gaudi leaves home early for work, as he does every morning. It's a chilly day. Brrr, he utters as he pulls his hat down over his ears. He warms his hands with his breath, buttons up his jacket, and starts to walk. Antoni Gaudi lives in a pink house in the middle of a park that looks like an enchanted forest made of stone. He goes down the steps that lead to the exit and greets his friend the dragon, the guardian of the park. "See you later, my dear friend," he says, raising his hat. "Look after the park until my return. I must hurry. I don't want to be late for work." The multicolored dragon replies with a smile to this ritual, which is repeated every morning. Meanwhile, Mr. Gaudi quickens his step and walks down to the city. Like every morning, the streets are bustling. Horse carts are urged on by shouts from their drivers. Trams packed full of passengers screech on bicycles fly along at great speed like swallows negotiating the traffic. Mr. Gaudi walks along, not paying attention. He's rather absent-minded, and he sometimes bumps into other pedestrians, or crosses the road without looking. "Careful there! Look where you're going!" shouts a cyclist. To passer-by, Mr. Gaudi resembles a white-bearded beggar, lost in thought. Some of them never step out of the way, fearing he might ask them for money. You'd never imagine that this is Barcelona's most famous architect. Thanks to his imagination, some of the city's most original and emblematic buildings have been created. He has also designed monuments, lampposts, benches, and even paving stones. Yet today, like every other day, he goes along his way, absorbed in his thoughts. Nobody recognizes the taciturn old man as he walks by. Mr. Gaudi arrives at Casa Mila, an apartment building that he has completed recently. Like all his projects, Casa Mila looks like nothing ever seen before. Resembling an enormous mountain of stone, its curving silhouette looks like something out of a dream or a fairy tale. Nonetheless, many people find this building extremely ugly, claiming that it looks more like a quarry than a block of flats. Thus its nickname, La Pedera, which means quarry in Catalan. This morning, Mr. Gaudi is at Casa Mila trying to calm down some residents who aren't happy with all their new home. "Look here, Mr. Architect," says a lady, "you may be a genius, but with these curved walls and ceilings that look more like a cave than a flat, it's impossible to furnish or hang a picture." "And what about my grand piano? It doesn't fit in the music room. Can you tell me where exactly I'm supposed to put my piano?" "Madam," answers Gaudi with his eyebrows raised, on the verge of losing his patience, "I suggest you try playing the violin." After an hour of listening to complaints, the old architect's head is about to explode, and he goes up to the rooftop terrace for a bit of air. He breathes deeply and sits down on a step. "People who are so conventional drive me mad," he murmurs, while he watches the flight of pigeons in the sky. "Why is it so difficult for them to let go of their prejudices and open up their imaginations?" "Right, off to work. We've wasted enough time this morning," he says to himself as he gets to his feet. Mr. Gaudi heads out onto the street and starts to walk, munching along on some of the hazelnuts that he normally carries in his pockets. A few blocks away from Casa Mila, the biggest project of his life is being built. A church called the Sagrada Familia, the Church of the Holy Family. It will be as big as a cathedral and as tall as a skyscraper. The old architect arrives at the Sagrada Familia and goes down to the workshop. There, his collaborators update him on the building's progress. For those who don't know him well, Mr. Gaudi may appear to be the most difficult and chaotic architect in the world. Rather than sketching plans on paper, he prefers to illustrate his ideas with handmade cardboard or plastic sculptures. Sometimes he sets up models made of cables, ropes, and hanging weights, and uses mirrors to visualize his designs right side up. He often arrives at work site with new ideas and changes the project on the spur of the moment, almost on a whim. Nonetheless, his assistants, workers, and craftsmen who have known him for many years have learned to interpret his ideas, transforming them into stone, brick, and mosaic, or wrought iron until they finally become art. As evening falls, Mr. Gaudi retires to talk to Josep Maria Giulio, one of his closest collaborators. The young artist puts a question to him that has been worrying him for some time. "Master, the construction of the Sagrada Familia is going well. Soon we'll finish it, the first towers, but have you considered that it may take many more years to complete this great work? Clearly we won't live to see it finished." "My dear Julio, I know who I am working for, and my client is in no hurry. How do you think the cathedrals of the past were built? The Sagrada Familia is a project that will span several generations. Each one will help to enrich its splendor. While it's true that we can only begin it and allow others to finish it, one day it will be completed and it will be a joy to see. The Sagrada Familia will be the pride of Barcelona, I can assure you." This evening Mr. Gaudi can't linger because he has arranged to have dinner with his friend Count Guel. After giving some final instructions to his colleagues, he puts on his hat and says goodbye. Rushing off to meet his friend, his head full of ideas, he crosses the road again without looking and has the second near miss of the day. "Watch where you're going, mister!" shouts a traffic guard. Dazed, the old architect stammers out an apology, gets onto a tram, and heads to the upper quarter of the city. Count Yasubi Guel is Mr. Gaudi's only neighbor in the park where he lives. In fact, Count Guel is the park's owner, and his name is written in large letters in mosaics at the entrance, Park Guel. With his fortune, he has financed many of Mr. Gaudi's projects, although he often asks himself if he's not becoming as eccentric as his friend. He sometimes wonders whether the architect's outlandish designs will eventually ruin him. When they built Park Güell some years ago, the Count wanted to create a residential area for the rich, full of luxury mansions, but nobody was interested in his idea of a garden city. Now, just he and Mr. Gaudi live in the solitary park. Seated on the bench that snakes around the square, the Count lets out a melancholy sigh. "Antoni, my friend," he says, "we must yield to the evidence that this park will never be what I hoped it would be. Between those who think it's far too from the city center and those who detest your architecture, of the 60 plots up for sale, only one has sold." "You are right, Don Yasubi," answers Mr. Gaudi. "I'm afraid that you and I are the only people who like my architecture." "Well, now, I'm not saying that I love it, but I certainly respect it," replies the Count, getting to his feet. After walking for a while in silence, Count Güell turns to his friend, strokes his beard solemnly, and declares, "Let's say no more, Antoni. We're going to forget about the garden city that will never be, and all those rich people who will never come to live here. I'm tired of seeing this park so empty. This marvelous place wasn't built for two solitary old men like us to live in alone. I've decided that Park Güell should become a public park where children can play, families can enjoy themselves, and everyone who comes to Barcelona can visit." "An excellent idea, Don Yasubi," responds Mr. Gaudi enthusiastically. The two friends dine together on the Count's mansion Whilst Don Yusubi tucks into a feast, Mr. Gaudi, a vegetarian, is happy to eat a green salad and some steamed vegetables. The evening hours quietly pass, and the two friends continue their endless conversation, recalling memories of their youth and imagining new projects that will never come to fruition. "Just between the two of us, Don Yusubi, do you know what my great dream as an architect is?" says Mr. Gaudi with a look of complicity. "I would like to construct a monumental building in New York, the city of skyscrapers. Don't laugh, dear friend. I even have the plans drawn." "Ah, America, the New World," exclaims the Count, a smile lighting up his face as he imagines the land where his father made his fortune many years ago. It is late when the two friends part. On his way home, Mr. Gaudi stops to say goodnight to the multicolored dragon. "Here I am, my friend. Another dinner with the Count, trying to put the world to rights, as usual. But we know that our time is coming to an end. One day, in the not-too-distant future, we'll be history, and you'll still be here guarding the park for the generations to come. Good night, dear dragon. May Providence be with you." The moon and stars shine in the sky. Above Park Güell, and Mr. Gaudi walks towards his house, lost in thought. Imagining new buildings in his head, he designs arches, domes, vaults, and columns. However, as he glances up at the full moon, he stops in his footsteps, and the distant memory of a young love that wasn't to be invades his thoughts. For a moment, he seems to feel a pang of melancholy, but he quickly pulls down his hat, quickens his steps, and enters the doorway. Tomorrow it's back to work, and there's so much to be done. Antoni Gaudi, 1852 to 1926. Antoni Gaudi i Cornet is one of the most renowned architects of our time and the great master of the Catalan modernism. He contributed toward creating the image of Barcelona, and every year millions of tourists visit the city to admire places like Park Güell, the Sagrada Familia, or Casa Mila. However, Gaudi wasn't born in Barcelona, but in Tarragona. The exact place of his birth is not known, as two towns, Reus and Riudoms, both claim to be his birthplace. Although he was a good student, Gaudi says his best teacher was nature itself, with its infinite variety of textures and geological and botanical forms. Early on, he discovered his vocation for architecture and moved to Barcelona to study at university, where he quickly began to stand out because of his personality and his original designs. As a young man, Gaudi left no one indifferent, and on the day he graduated, the dean of the Faculty of Architecture said, "I don't know if we have before us a genius or a madman." Not long after beginning his professional career, Gaudi got a job that would change his life and to which he would dictate himself for more than 40 years. Midway through the 19th century, a group of devotees decided to build a church that would serve as an expiatory temple for the city of Barcelona, but the project progressed very slowly, and the original architect was dismissed. Gaudi appeared to be the ideal candidate to continue the work because he was talented as well as very religious. He was to completely transform the project and would end up creating one of the most original architectural experiments in modern art. The Sagrada Familia is such a huge project that it is still under construction many years after the death of Gaudi. He, however, was not worried about how long the work would take. As he said, everything in nature, like the centenarian oak, needs time to grow. Apart from the Sagrada Familia, Gaudi also created many other structures, from apartment buildings to mansions and churches. He also designed lampposts, paving stones, furniture, and interiors. He never traveled out of Spain, and the majority of his work is to be found in Barcelona. Casa Batlló and Casa Mila, two of his most emblematic buildings, are situated on Passeig de Gràcia, Barcelona's main avenue. Gaudi also carried out some work outside of Catalonia. For example, the palace of the Bishop of Astorga in Leon, the tower named El Capricho in Comillas Santander, and the restoration of the Cathedral of Palma de Mallorca. Gaudi was an unusual person. He neglected his appearance and wore the same suit every day until it literally fell to pieces. With his diet and health, however, he was very meticulous. He was strictly vegetarian, no salt, and did not smoke or drink alcohol. He never married and had no interest in fame or fortune. His life was dedicated entirely to his work. He was said to be inflexible and stubborn, and he would also be affectionate and had a subtle sense of humor. He was considerate to his collaborators and workers. He always encouraged them to do their very best. His motto was Festina lente, a Latin phrase that means more haste, less speed. In 1878, Gaudi met Eusebi Güell, a young entrepreneur and the son of one of the country's richest families, who had also received the title of the Count from the King. Their friendship was to last the rest of their lives. Thanks to his personal fortune and his artistic sensitivity, Count Güell became Gaudi's patron. Thus, some of Gaudi's most inspired works, including Palau Güell, Colonial Güell, and eventually Park Güell, were born. In Great Britain, Güell had seen the typical garden cities and was captivated by their harmonious combination of nature and urban landscape. In this period, city inhabitants, especially in Barcelona, lived crowded together in inhospitable quarters where disease was rampant. Searching for a healthier way of living, Güell decided to build a garden city on a hill on the outskirts of Barcelona, and he commissioned Gaudi with the project, giving him complete artistic freedom. In Park Güell, Gaudi created an extraordinarily original place where he developed some of his most characteristic techniques. For example, trencadís, mosaics made using waste ceramics. In 1904, the park was opened and both Güell and Gaudi went to live there. However, as residential estate, Park Güell was a commercial failure, and it was far from the city center, and also, even though it may be difficult to believe today, Gaudi's architecture was not popular at the time. For several years, Güell and Gaudi were practically the only residents of the park. The Count died in 1916, and Gaudi continued to live in Park Güell until the last year of his life, when he moved to his studio at the Sagrada Familia. He died after being run over by a tram in 1926. Shortly afterwards, the Güell family donated the park to the city of Barcelona. Today, the house where Gaudi once lived is a museum, and Güell's mansion is a primary school. 100 years later, and every year on the 12th of February, St. Eulia's Day, the former patron saint of Barcelona, Gaudi and Güell, the two most popular cabezudos, human figures with huge heads, of the Baldiri Riac school, continue to walk together, parading with school children. Antoni Gaudi's timeline. 1852. Antoni Gaudi is born on the 25th of June in Reus or Riudoms, Tarragona. 1873. He begins his studies at the School of Architecture in Barcelona. 1878. He completes his degree in architecture, and he meets Eusebi Güell. 1883. At the age of 31, he becomes head architect of the Sagrada Familia. He designs El Capricho in Comillas, Cantabria, and the pavilions of the Finca Güell. 1888. He finishes Casa Vincennes and works on the Teresian School in Barcelona. 1890. He completes Palau Güell. He designs Casa Bontins in Leon and the Episcopal Palace in Astorga. 1900. Construction begins at Park Güell. Gaudi completes Casa Calvé toward the best building of the year. 1906, he goes to live in Park Güell and finishes Casa Batlló. 1910, construction is completed at Casa Mila on Barcelona's Passeig de Gràcia. 1915, after finishing the crypt in the Colònia Güell, Gaudi decides to devote himself exclusively to the Sagrada Familia, which is said to be completed in 2030. 1918, Yosubi Güell, his friend and patron, dies. 1926, Gaudi is run over by a tram on the 7th of June and dies 3 days later. His funeral is attended by thousands of mourners. Author's note. When you have been born and raised in Barcelona, Gaudi becomes an inedible part of your childhood. And for me, Park Güell is most likely my backyard. When I was a young boy, they used to hire out bicycles to children in the park's large square, and it was there that I learnt to ride a bike. I remember one day all the bikes for young children, the one with stabilizers, were taken, and my mother hired a normal bicycle with just 2 wheels. She assured me that she would hold me, and I began to pedal, even though I was quite scared. All of a sudden, I realized that my mother was no longer behind me. I was riding on my own, but instead of losing my balance and falling, I happily kept pedaling. I just had learnt how to ride a bike. Now that I am older, I continue going to the park to accompany visitors who come to see Barcelona, or simply go to the highest point and contemplate the view of the city from there. I often ask myself what Park Güell might have been like 100 years ago, when there were no residents, tourists, or practically any houses around it, and along its avenues strolled 2 white-bearded old men, Güell and Gaudi. This book is a small tribute to those 2 people. Thanks to them, today we all can enjoy such a unique and inspirational place as Park Güell. Gaudi's itinerary. A stroll with Mr. Gaudi. Stop number 1. Mr. Gaudi's house is in Park Güell. Isn't it beautiful? Today it's the Gaudi House Museum. Stop number 2. The dragon greeting Mr. Gaudi is covered with tiles of many colors. It's still there today, guarding the park's entrance. Stop number 3. When Casa Mila was built, many people found it extremely ugly and gave it all sorts of funny nicknames, like La Pedrera, quarry in Catalan. Stop number 4. The roof terrace at Casa Mila is a sculpture garden. The staircase exits look like meringues, and the chimneys like medieval warriors. Stop number 5. Sagrada Familia was also known as the Cathedral for the Poor, and it's used to have school for workers' children. Stop number 6. The construction of Sagrada Familia has been long and arduous. It is expected to be finished in 2026, and they recently extended that date to 2030. Stop number 7. Casa Batlló used to be called the House of Bones due to its bone-like columns and its balconies resembling skulls. Stop number 8. In Park Güell there is a great hall supported by columns. On its ceiling there are 4 rosettes representing the 4 seasons. Stop number 9. From the undulating bench that surrounds the main square, you can enjoy great views over the city of Barcelona. And stop number 10. The 2 houses at the entrance seem to be made of gingerbread, like in a fairy tale. The entire Park Güell is an enchanting dream world of fantasy and imagination.